In this video, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know when fishing a stream, from water clarity and lure selection, to water depth and fish behavior, how the changing seasons affect the fishing, conservation techniques that preserve the life of the fish. Understanding these techniques is essential to boosting your fishing knowledge. Not only will it lead to building more memories on the water, but also aid in the conservation of any stream or body of water that you're fishing. Don't forget, at the end of this video, I'm going to be taking you guys along with me to prove how these techniques work on the water while we catch some awesome fish and prove to you guys that these techniques do work. Tip number one is choosing the right gear. Streams aren't predictable in the same way that lakes and ponds can be. They vary in water flow, direction, depth. You could be fishing one spot in the stream and it's nothing but sand and grass, and you go 10 feet up the stream and it's all rock, grass, shallow water. So having the right gear and making sure you guys are using the right rod and reel is incredibly important to making sure when you guys do hook a fish, you're able to land it and you're able to work your guys' lures properly. When I'm fishing streams, I always throw it on my spinning rod. This is just a HMG from Fenwick. This is the best rod for the money that I've personally found. And I have that paired with a 2500 series Dial-Walk Tatula. I got 20-pound braid on there. Braid is a lot thinner than your fluorocarbon or your monofilament for the pound, right? So I think this is like 0.01, 0.015 millimeter thickness. And when you're throwing a 20-pound fluorocarbon, you're looking at like 0.25, 0.3. So I like to run this because you can put a lot more line on here. It's stronger. And as long as you have, you know, a good 5-6 foot fluorocarbon leader, like you guys can't even see that right now, right? A 5-6 foot fluorocarbon leader. This is 15 pound just because I want to be a little bit thinner, I want to be a little more finesse. If you're throwing a little bit heavier gauge fluorocarbon or monofilament, then you're going to be running the risk of your spinner not spinning properly or a fish being able to see that line reflecting in the sun. So choosing the right gear is also essential depending on what species you guys are planning on targeting. For example, if you guys are planning on targeting bass, you'd want to have different gear, different reels, different rod and reel than you would if you were targeting trout. Obviously, the larger the fish you're going to be trying to target in the body of water, you're going to want to use the larger reel, a heavier rod, and a heavier pound test. Choosing the right rod and reel will also make sure that you guys have optimum performance when you're fishing, right? Whether that's going for a species, whether that's fishing sand or rocks or shallow or deep water, it doesn't matter. Having the right gear will make sure that it performs for you guys and you guys are able to land those fish. Fish do tend to see that braid, so just to make sure they don't, I like to throw on that 5 to 6 foot fluorocarbon leader. It has no stretch and that braid has no stretch, so when I'm throwing that lure, throwing that spinner, I know what I'm hitting. I can feel if it's grass, I know if I get a bite, I can tell if it's a rock, right? So that's very, very important. If you guys are just getting out, you guys are beginning, get yourself some braid, get yourself some fluorocarbon, look up a video how to tie a blood knot or a uni-to-uni knot, and you guys should be good to go. All right, tip number 2 is make sure you guys are using the right bait and lures, right? So depending on what type of species you guys are targeting, whether it's trout, bass, pike, catfish, doesn't matter. You want to use a bait that those fish are relating to. Those fish typically prey on, and then they'll actively chase, follow, and hit. I like to kind of look at water clarity, right? Is the water dark? Is it stained? Is it clear? If it's clear and it's sunny, clear and it's cloudy, vice versa, right? So a good rule of thumb is as follows. It's a lot bigger than what I usually use, but it's a 3/8 ounce rainbow trout colored rooster tail. I chose a rainbow trout color because the colors are so vibrant. I'm fishing a maximum depth of 3.5 to 4 feet, so those vibrant greens, the vibrant oranges, and that gold blade show up really well in those depths, especially on a beautiful sunny day like this. This is just your typical inline spinner. I usually run an 1/8 to a 1/6 size spinner, but I've been throwing on this 3/8. It's slender, so it's got a pretty small profile still, but it's big enough to entice those larger fish like you guys just saw. If I'm not throwing a spinner bait, I'm usually running my baitcaster setup, a 3.5 to 4 inch Yozuri jerkbait on there. It's really, really important that you guys get the floating, right? So when you throw that jerkbait out there and it's sitting in the water, if you get a suspending or a sinking one, it's going to continue to sink, right? And if you're fishing a stream, you're going to get hung up on rocks, hung up in grass, and hung up on stumps, and you're going to break off, right? And those jerkbaits, that can be like, you know, $5 to $15, right? They're not cheap, okay? When I am fishing shallow water, I can toss it in there and run it as shallow as I want, right? Being able to fish those ripples when the fish are up in the shallows in the morning and the sun feeding. If I'm fishing those deeper pockets, I can twitch that thing down, and I can get it down, you know, to 4.5, 5 foot deep water. You're not going to find that all the time in rivers, but when you do, it's nice to have a jerkbait with a slightly larger bill and floating, because I can fish those deeper pockets and I can fish up into those shallow sections. Right? If there's like a tree down across the water, or I can see like grass or sticks in the water, get it down to that farther pocket, shake on its way up. A lot of times that'll entice a bite. A fish will be able to see that, see it shimmer, and they'll hit it when you're letting it pause. Other times you just want to get it above that structure so you're not going to get snagged, right? And water is constantly moving, so floating just adds that extra bit of security so you're not going to lose your lure all the time. This is what I kind of recommend for beginners. For those of you targeting, bass, catfish, walleye, anything that you might want to lean towards that bait route in the winter to springtime of the year, and you guys are going to be throwing those worms, those minnows, stuff like that. You want to get that down to depth, right? You guys want to find deep water, slow-moving water, and any sort of pocket structure that has access to sand, right? What that does is when that sun comes out and, say, the air temperature is 30, 35 degrees, right? Those fish are going to be sitting at the bottom of the deepest pool 9 times out of 10. As soon as that sun comes up, it'll start to warm up that sand, and those fish will push shallower to feed and to warm up on that sand. So tip number 3 is location, time of day, and time of year. If it's summer, winter, fall, spring, fish are going to be acting different, fish are eating different things, and you guys have to know that when you're going extreme fishing, because it's kind of exacerbated, right? In a lake that doesn't freeze, those fish will still bite in the same areas. It'll just be slower, and the fish will be more lethargic. Specifically trout fishing, start with summer, right? The water temp is pretty uniform, especially if it's runoff fed, spring fed. Those waters are going to typically be cooler. If you're fishing tail waters, your best bet's going to be fishing in the morning or in the evening, because that water temperature is cooler, right? During the day, if the water temperature is fairly hot, especially for trout, you're going to want to fish that deeper water if it's between mid-morning to mid-afternoon. But come evening, you guys can pretty much catch them throughout the entire stream. The fall is where it kind of starts to get a little bit different. When you're fishing in the fall, those fish will relate structure a lot more, right? So especially if you're fishing for bass, if you're fishing for walleye, anything like that in the stream, a lot of those fish species are holding tight to that cover because that's where the bait fish are. That time of the year, all the fish that have spawned in the springtime, their fry are starting to get to the size where they're a sustainable forage for those fish. So a lot of times I'd like to look for structure, deep pockets, stuff like that, right? When you're fishing for trout, you got brown trout spawning in the fall, right? So you guys are going to want to be target where they spawn. All right, find that sand, find that mud, and find that transition line from mud to rock, right? If you guys can find some sort of undercut bank, where there's a sand cove on the other side, so those brown trout are going to be spawning. If you're fishing for trout in the wintertime, you have to make sure that it doesn't get cold enough in your area for those streams to freeze all the way through. So, for example, in my area, we have streams that freeze all the way through, right? So fish go to what's known as wintering pools, right? And for us, the biggest wintering pool in the area is our big lake that sits 10 miles down our water drainage area. In wintertime, or come late fall, the fish start to migrate and they live in the lake for the winter. It's a big enough stream where they have deep enough pockets. Those fish will all concentrate themselves and congregate in the most oxygenated, deepest pool with the most amount of food available, right? So just because it's deep doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be fish there in the wintertime. A good wintering pool has a combination of structure, rock, and soft sediment. That means that those rocks will help disturb the water, which will help create oxygen, oxygenate the water. The rocks will provide structure for the fish and for the fry to survive through the winter. And soft sediment will ensure that there's food available. And when there is sunlight, that sun will penetrate the water and it will start to help grasses to grow. Okay. Tip number 4 is reading the water. The bottom line is just to find deep water, period. If you're a beginner going out and you followed steps 1 through 3 already, the biggest thing is to find deep and find slow moving water. All right, here we go. Tip number 5. And that's conservation practices, right? The biggest keys to this is using nets, right? And not just using any nets, using rubber-coated nets. Make sure when you fight the fish and you get it to the bank, you're able to scoop the fish up. You don't have to worry about breaking your line, because sometimes in a stream that can be really difficult, right? Sometimes there's rocks, sometimes there's a levee, sometimes you're hanging off a cliff, right? But you want to make sure that you can get your net down there and that you can scoop the fish safely. Using rubber-coated nets ensures that the nets can't get tangled in their gills, can't get tangled around their fins, and have them, break a fin or cut a gill or anything, or hurt their eyes, anything like that that would affect the way they live, breathe, eat underwater is not good. Another big thing is putting the fish back where you found it, right? And especially if you're fishing spring or fall. A lot of those fish that you guys are going to be targeting often are going to be spawning, right? They're protecting fry or they're laying eggs, and you catch those fish and you don't put them back in the same pocket that you guys caught them out of. The chance they could not find it there, they just got caught. A huge wrench has just been thrown in their, cycle, right? So releasing the fish back to the pocket that you caught it out of will help that fish kind of go on about its business instead of being a larger unnecessary disruption. The biggest tips for conservation is just making sure you limit the fish's time out of the water, right? If you guys have access to nets, which I highly recommend, making sure that when you fight that fish to the bank and you scoop them with a net, don't go pulling them out of the water, right, to get the hook out. Get down, don't be lazy, get down in the water, leave the fish, put your net in the water. The fish is healthy, it's gonna live. You can take your pliers or your hands, get the lure out, whatever. Then have your phone already set up. If you guys are gonna take pictures or all that, hold the fish up, take a picture. If it's not good, put it back in the net. Check the picture. If it's good, release the fish right away. If not, it's still in the net. It's healthy. Get your picture and then make sure when you put it back, it's good to go. Right? That's just very, very important. I can't stress that enough. A lot of times people are out there just gung-ho, catching fish left and right. You find dead fish washed up on the bank literally every day. I just want to emphasize that this is incredibly important for the health of the stream and the enjoyment of anglers that are going to fish after you. I hope you guys use these tips that I shared in this video. You go out there, you get on the stream, and you guys catch your first fish on the stream, or you go after those numbers or trophies. I'm sure this will help. This is a beautiful fish. We just pulled out of this pocket. And like I was saying, I have it in the net right now. It's completely in the water. I'm making sure that it is being able to catch its breath and everything is going to be going as planned. This whole stream, stretch of stream here behind me, is nothing but slow moving, deep current. That's where fish love to feed. And early in the morning, those fish will want to be feeding in those slightly deeper pockets, at least until that sun gets up and it will warm the shallows a little bit more. But this is a beautiful, probably 18 and a half inch fish. I mean, you can't complain about that. That's a beautiful fish. Look at the kype on that guy. That's a stunning brown trout. Definitely pushing 5-6 years old. We're gonna get him back in the water and get a nice release on this guy. Treat him right. Let's get him back. Make sure he's good and healthy to go. Look at that, that's a beauty. See you, buddy. He's gonna head right back down to deeper water, recuperate, and he'll be back out feeding literally in like 5 to 10 minutes. That is how to catch and release a beautiful brown trout of trophy caliber. Literally next cast. So this is a great example of the question, does size matter, right? So I'll show you guys this. I'm gonna get him out of the water just for a quick second, and I'll get him in that net. That is a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, and that is a 9-inch fish. We just cut an 18 and a half incher on this, and now we can catch one literally less than half that size. Let's get him back in the water. There he goes. But that just goes to show you guys that not all the times are you gonna catch big fish on big lures, and vice versa. You can catch huge fish on tiny lures. It's more about the kind of mood they're in and what they're used to feeding on, right? If I were to go into a high mountain lake right now, for example, right? There's nothing gonna be spawning in there yet because there's still probably ice, okay? But as soon as ice is off, if I were to throw this, there's no fry. There's nothing that looks like this, so it might not do as well. If I were to throw a leech or a scud, I might do a lot better. Or if I would be fishing this, right? If I had a leech or a scud, I may not do as well as this is, right? Because rainbow trout are spawning right now. They're used to seeing those fry, and this resembles the kind of bait that they're usually after, right? So a 20-inch fish would love to eat that, and so would a 9-inch fish, right? It's what they're used to feeding on. It doesn't look to be giant, but it's a quality fish. We're gonna go ahead and net this guy. It's way smaller than our first one, but a few inches bigger than our last one. So beautiful colors on that brown. Oh my goodness. Probably about 12 inches, 12 incher or so. Beautiful fish. You can see my breath, it's freezing out here. We're gonna get him back in the water. But nonetheless, another gorgeous, gorgeous brown trout. There we go. Not a giant, a little bit longer of a fish though. Another beautiful brown trout, probably about 15 and a half, maybe 16. But I'd rather get her back in the water here quick. Gorgeous fish. Catching fish out of here. Can't complain about that. That's where those fish are most likely to be stacked up. Right here, early morning, sun just came out. Warming up the water, warming up the sand. There we go. There we go. See, I knew he was sitting right there. I know where to cast. A beautiful 10-inch brown trout. Can't complain about catching fish. Let's get him back. There we go. And that's a giant. Okay, it's not as big as I thought, but it's a solid fish, about the same size as our first one here. Come on, come back. Come here, buddy. Come here. He's a little bit smaller here. Net. This just goes to show that I casted a bunch of times into that stream, and this one didn't hit until I said last cast, right? Another beautiful 17 and a half inch fish, a little bit smaller than our first one, but a quality brown trout, right? Let's get him back in the water. All right, I knew he was sitting right there. I made one more cast before I left this spot, and I got this nice brown. Let's see how big. A very healthy 12 incher. All right, that fish is thick for 12 inches. Look at that, he's got a little tail accident or something. I wonder what happened there. Maybe hit by a boat in the lake. Weird. Let's get him back. All right, we got one. Strong boy. I don't think he's very big. He's not bad. Just a hefty fish. Thick. Look at how gorgeous that fish is. Beautiful, probably 15 and a half. Pretty thick boy though. Gorgeous fish. Let's get him back in the water. Let's go. Beautiful fish. This is an absolute beautiful fish that we just pulled out of here. Look at that beautiful, beautiful trout. Wow. You cannot complain about that fish. That is 17 and thick all day long. Wow. Awesome fish. Let's get her back in the water. Another beautiful, probably 12 and a half, 13 inch brown. Can't complain about them apples. Beautiful fish. Let's get him back in the water. If you guys follow these tips that I presented in this video, you will no doubt be successful on your next fishing adventure. I encourage absolutely everybody that has any sort of helpful tips for beginners or even experienced anglers to drop them down in the comments below for the species and types of rivers that you fish in your area. We caught some absolutely incredible fish in this video, and I know these tips will help you guys out in the future. I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I hope I see you guys out in the river. Until then, keep casting.